right. So let me know if we could hear. Okay, so I think we should have sound now coming in. So sorry for the sound issues. I'll try to check that before. So, all right. So I just wanted to, welcome to the March 25th, 2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream. And if you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can just simply ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, I may be delayed in responding to particular questions as the live stream goes on, but we'll go through all the questions chronologically as asked. If we could avoid asking and repeating questions, that would be appreciated. We should have an index of all the topics covered today in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field, and with timestamps so you can quickly navigate. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm, who we see on, for creating that website. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate their efforts. And we'll give Jazz Dude a special thanks for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a great resource of information, of articles, links, and we get quick answers to questions outside of the live stream. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'll be the host of the live stream today. I'm presenting from the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, and we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we see from Zephaniah asks, "Hey Greg, I've never used a tempo track. Can you demonstrate the changing of tempos in a tempo track?" I hope I asked that correctly. All right. So let's say we'll just start with a new project here, and we'll start off with like how to kind of get started. So I'll just put a kind of just random drum loop in. So let's see if we have. Okay, so let's say right now I have a pattern here, and we will go ahead and we'll play this pattern. So, and I could have this audio be in musical mode, and if it's in musical mode, what will happen? So this will automatically kind of synchronize with the project tempo when we put it into musical mode. So we have kind of two different tempo modes. So if I come here, we have kind of like a static tempo, which is what it'll be by default. So if I open up a tempo track, I will just come right over here. Let's open a tempo track. And we could just say, okay, we go to our tempo track. And right now we have a static tempo. So whatever tempo value I type in here, let's say if I wanted to be 100 beats a minute from 120, I want it to be 88 beats a minute, that when we do this, it'll change the tempo of the project. So if it's going to be a static tempo, we could just enter the value in directly there. Now, once we have the tempo track, if we want the tempo track to change, we can just come over and let me just see if I still have Outlook open. Let me close Outlook. All right, so if we want a tempo to change, we could just enter this in our tempo track. So again, you could right click and add a tempo track. If you have like Cubase Elements, you may have to hit Control T or Command plus the letter T for tempo, and that could open the tempo track in a separate editor. I think Artist and Pro and Nuendo, you could have the tempo track right on the project window. If we want to put in a different tempo value, let's say at measure 3, I could just put in my value here. We could change our value so that we can say, okay, starting at measure 3, I want to go from 100 to 120 beats a minute. So we'll listen to it. Speed up starting at measure 3. Now that's kind of like a step change. So if we come over here, we could just place our value, and if I wanted to adjust the tempo again, we could do these in kind of steps. So we'll step to 120 and step to 140. Now if I wanted this tempo to ramp instead of step, if we kind of extend this over, we could just see whether it's step or ramp. So now if I put in a tempo change, let's say here, and I wanted this to do a retard, we could just say, okay, I want to do a ramp, and then as I adjust my tempo, we'll have just a gradual slowing down of the tempo, so we don't have to put in like 100 points to kind of get the tempo to slow, that we could just kind of ramp it down. So if you don't see like this step or ramp, you could access it kind of right here from the info line where you could set the values, or if you just extend this over on the track controls, you could see it directly there. So once we have this, now if I'm like, okay, maybe I like this tempo, but maybe I want to experiment, we could also just come over here and we could have track versions of tempos. So I could duplicate that and say, okay, I want this maybe to put a node in here. I want that to speed up and then slow down. So we could just come over here and say, okay, let's listen to this. So maybe if I like that as my tempo, I could just simply come over here and go back and forth between alternate tempo tracks. Is really helpful for film composers. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Zephaniah, and thanks for joining us. All right, we have Raw Justice Hip Hop checking in from across the river from me in Capitol Heights, Maryland. Thanks for being online. Always wonderful to see Tim K from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, who's probably sleeping on a couch upstairs, and Mark Rabin's dog and other pets that are learning about Cubase as well. All right, we see Stefan from Sweden, Jan from Cubase Index. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude. We have Kerwin Young from Atlanta. We have Mark Rabin checking in with, everyone will give a big woof to Stella. And Stella is with Mark in Montana, in the United States. Thanks for joining us. Uno Momento, always a loyal attendee from Finland, and a longer Cubase user than myself. All right. All right, going through comments. All right. Sorry about the sound. Not checking that. All right, we have Marcos Castro checking in from San Jose, California. We have Raz from Sweden and Ethnoscope. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Bratman Studios. It's supposed to be 82, but it's cold and overcast today in Whittier, California, in Orange County. All right, Mark Rabin asks, so my last recording used drum loops and it ended up not grooving. So I need to know more about best practices drums, how to get my drums to groove with my music. All right, so let's say, because a lot of times, drum loops will, people would tend to use drum loops because, because it did offer a particular groove. But if we wanted to kind of modify the groove of a drum loop, so let's say we'll take this example here. So if we were to look at this, we can say, okay, this is probably going to be a bit behind the beat overall, like it has a groove to it. So let's say if we want to do this with audio, what we could do is just when we go to our quantize settings here, so we'll open that up, and let's say, okay, I'm mostly kind of dealing with half notes or eighth notes in this particular groove. And we can say, okay, let's make it 16th notes. And what I want to do is, let's say, if I wanted to take this particular audio file, I could take this drum loop and let's just quantize this more to straight 16th notes. So we'll listen to the before. All right, and let's say if we quantize this to 16ths, I'll come right over here. And we'll see if that, so often we'll see if that. So I'll undo the quantize. You can see this little change, but let's say now I wanted to put more swing on it. And this is often what we're going to be doing. So let's say we'll take just this beginning part here. And I want to apply a swing factor, and I'll just kind of go to an extreme. So we see some of that move a little bit. Let's go to in 80s. If we look at kind of the transients here as we apply the quantize, you can see that they will slightly shift there. So, you could try to apply different grooves to drum loops if you wanted to. But another thing that's kind of always interesting musically is, maybe you have straight drums and other instruments are grooving against the drums. So, if you think of, like classic Motown is a great example of this, where the drums are pretty straight for the most part, but the bass is really grooving, and that creates kind of the tension. But if you don't have the groove kind of have that rhythmic tension with something that's straight, at that point you may, the groove may not be as noticeable if it's not contrasted with something rhythmically straight as well. So a couple things to try, Mark. All right, we have Tony Trunzo checking in from Australia. Says, thanks for all your help in learning this amazing software. So thanks for joining us in the middle of the night. We have John Costigan joining us from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have DJ Mixes from Switzerland. Thanks for being online with us tonight. Okay, so we have Channel Ripoff says, hi G, how can I not just offset bars but offset time as well? What I mean is I want bar 10 to be 0, the start for every song, plus I need that to be 0 seconds as well so I can see everything. Okay, so let's say I'm here and I'm going to open up just a quick ruler track. So we'll come over to our ruler track and we'll set this to be seconds. So we have bars and beats in seconds. So let's say I want bar 10 to be so right now we see this as like 22, 21 seconds, 21 and a half seconds, something like that. All right, so what I want to do now is to make this time position 0. So I would go to my project menu and we would see set time code at cursor. So instead of it being 21 seconds, 18 frames, what I'm going to do is just 0 it out. So now when we hit OK, and then it says we've modified the timecode offset. Do you want to keep the project content at its current timecode positions? I'll say no. And now when we come here, we could actually see that bar 10. If we open up we can see that this is going to be at 0 seconds. So we could now come right over here. Let's go to our more options here, and we'll show our time display. So when we look at our time display here, We could see that in seconds. So as we approach, let's say we're in kind of negative time, and then all of a sudden at bar 10 starts right here is when it goes to 0 right at measure 10. So set the cursor directly at measure 10, go to your project and choose to set time code at cursor. When you're asked if you want to keep the current time objects, if you have existing events in the project, you would say no, that you don't want to keep those at the existing time. Then everything could measure 10 can start at a time code of 0 for the time representation. So let me know if that's helpful. Great to see Benny checking in from Sweden. All right, Mark Ravens is saying the Cubase Pet League, woof and meow. All right. Okay, so we see channel ripoff is now 808. It used to be 808 King. So thanks for letting us know. And channel ripoff from Northern Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. All right. It says Tommy from Florida, back in the old days. Okay. All right, we have Jayan L. Price says, greetings from Granada Hills, California. Thanks for being online with us this morning. All right, Mark Raven just says, thank you, Greg, for helping. So you're welcome. Okay, we see Val checking in from Vienna, Austria. All right, so Mark Raven just says, Greg, thanks, going to retract the tune and start with drum and bass, trying to keep the funk in the tune. Yeah, maybe just try, see if you could get the funk with just the bass, kind of creating that rhythmic tension. All right, so we have Thato J. Charret says, modulators are not doing anything when I add them, no effect. All right. So let's take a look. So, the modulators are going to be kind of track based. So if I come over here, let's say I want to, at this point, I will come over here. I think I have modulator info on. Okay, so when I come over here, I'm just going to add, let's say I have a plug-in for volume. So I'm going to, we'll just put in, let me clear my keyboard controller off. All right, so let's say I'm just going to come here and draw in a chord. I'll just play a chord in. All right, so let's say we have just a chord and we want to modulate that particular chord. All right, so when we do this, so we'll play. All right, so I wanted to open up, we'll go to our modulators here. And I'll just go ahead and we'll undo these modulators here. So it's, make sure that you're actually doing it on a particular track. So let's say we want to add a modulator. So let's do an LFO. So if I come here and I want, all right, so I want to modulate. So what I'm going to do is we have different modulation shapes. So if I wanted this to kind of do, and now I'm going to click on the plus sign, and I could just touch the parameter, and that's going to assign that parameter. So when we come over, we can now see that this parameter is being modulated. So if I wanted to, and if we want to adjust the rhythmic speed of it, so now let's say if I wanted to set up another modulator, so let's say I want this to be maybe a shaper. I'm going to come here, and I want this to control a plugin that's also on that particular track. So let's say I have my volume plugin here, so I'm going to click on plus, and as soon as I assign that parameter, and let's change the rhythmic value of that. And then you could also just come over and assign different parameters as well. So say if we go to this channel setting, I will come over here. So if I wanted this to do kind of the same modulation here, I could right click, let's say on the frequency, and then we could add the EQ to the automation. So we'll just, or to the modulator. So I'll just come right over here and say, let's put it onto slot 1. And then you could also just, you know, kind of come right over here and right click to assign parameters. So, but make sure that the modulators, you know, are on the particular track. So if we have a different track selected, those modulators won't have any impact. It's only going to have impact on the selected track. So the modulators are kind of track based. So let me know if that's helpful for you to get started. All right, so Val is just asking, can we have a MIDI logical editor that just quantizes around the 1 of every 4 beats, kind of specific? I don't know if that's possible. Okay, so let's say, so what we could do is, an approach for this would be to just simply select the 1 or to select beat 1, and then from there perhaps you know, choose that for quantization. So let's say I will just do some quick step entry here. Let's see if I have my step entry enabled. Okay, I'm just going to move it up here. All right, so I'll just enter in some notes here, quarter notes. Here, let me just take off the... Okay, so let's say I have these notes, and I'm just going to kind of mess up the timing of these notes. Okay, so let's say All right, so I'll just kind of repeat this phrase a couple times. So this phrase is off a little bit rhythmically. So if we look at this, I want to take notes that kind of fall within beat one. So let's say we have this, and I will go ahead and let's create this. So what I want to do now is to select notes. So let's go to our logical editor, and we're going to select notes like basically around beat one. So I can come over here to my logical editor. Let's go to setup. So we say we want to select type is equal to notes and their position. We'll come over here. So we'll choose position, and we'll say inside bar range. And here we're going to just say notes that are roughly around beat one. So we see beat one, beat two, beat three, beat four. So I'm just going to come over here. So what I want to do now is, as we do this, I'm going to select those notes that are around beat one, and then I could just hit Q for quantize. And it's only going to quantize those particular selected notes. So again, we can come right over here, select those particular notes, and quantize, and we see that the other notes are still off rhythmically, but these notes that fall roughly around beat one are the only ones quantized. So in essence, we're kind of selecting notes that fall around beat one with the logical editor, and then choosing to quantize as a separate step. So again, we would choose select, type is equal to note, position is, and we would choose inside bar range. And here I'm just going to roughly pick beat one. So if we look at this, this will be like a 4/4 measure. So beat 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now as we do that, we'll just come over here, run this, and then quantize, and only the notes around beat one are quantized. And if you want to take those two steps into a macro, you could do that as well if you wanted to. So let me know if that helps, Val, and if you need it as a macro, we could do that and set the quantized value. If you want me to show you that, just let me know. All right, wonderful to see Daniela as Da Vinci Girl on from Germany. Okay. All right, so we see from Dion Lee says tempo and time signatures don't seem to follow when modifying the project offset and setting it to new project start time. MIDI events do move to bar one, but the tempo and signatures don't move with it. All right, so let's give it a shot. Okay, so let me add a tempo track. Okay, and I'll come over here. Let me just drop. Okay, so so it says tempo and time signatures. Let me add a signature track as well. So I'll come here. Okay, so tempo and time signatures don't seem to follow in modifying the project offset and setting it to new project start time. MIDI events do move to bar one, but the tempo and signature tracks don't with it. Okay, so let's come over here. So I'm going to go to my project menu to the project setup. And let's say we want a 1 bar offset. So we'll give that a try here. So we'll try 1 bar offset. So this should give us a measure 0. Okay, it says you modified events to bar offset. Do you want to keep the project content at its current bar position? I'll say yes. All right, so I would say that this is still, let's see what happens if we say no to that. I understand that the time signature is going to stay, but we'll see if it's going to change the tempo. So let's come here and we'll choose no. So now everything is still starting at bar 0 with that. And if we want to, let's globally select. So let's say I globally select with my range tool. All right, let me just try just in range tool only mode. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong thing. All right, so let's see if I have the range here, and let's say if we go to range to insert time or insert silence. So if we do an insert silence, we'll see that that will just kind of put that particular bar in. So once we select that range, we could choose to insert silence, and that will maintain the, we look at our signature track will be maintained, as well as the tempo track wasn't altered from the original, but we still have the offset. So you can give that a try, Dayon. Very great to see Braxel on. Wonderful to see the artist known as Love on as well. We see Mark Rabin also just talking about the Groove Agent drums. Like what I just did in a project recently is, let's say if he had, I'm not sure if, I think you have the full Groove Agent version, but if we had kind of a generic drum pattern, is if you have the percussion agent, which I think I have installed here, so let me just, so let's say if we have the full Groove Agent, one thing that could really help with grooves, let's say we do just like a really, let's see. Is fine. All right, let me find just something right. So let's say we have a pattern kind of like this, and maybe like you don't think that the pattern is grooving enough. You know, one of the great things you could do is with the full Groove Agent is you could actually get the percussion agent. So you could have kind of like a straight feel with that, and just kind of come over here Like I usually start with Disco Craze. And now, as soon as we get this, just adding in the agent, the percussion agent on a track. Like, okay, like when you're going into like a pre-chorus or you want some more rhythmic activity to offset like the verse, you know, if you just kind of come right over here and say, okay, we go into the chorus, and you could bring it down and be kind of very subtle with the agents. So if we wanted to come over here, we could say, okay, I want to take, you know, just so, you know, if you have the full groove agent mark, you know, try just dropping in the percussion agent, and that could be just a really easy way to like fix a groove problem. It's just kind of like, you know, makes it sound like it's produced and much like a much slicker production. So that could be another thing to try. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. Let me find where I was. Sorry. All right, so I think I'm okay. All right, so in where I was. All right, wonderful to see Soren from Sweden. All right, so I see from Salam YouTube says, hi, how are you doing? Can I rear title on Cubase 13 Pro? So it could be that like one of my projects here was maybe created in 13 Pro, so you might see it listed as like a Cubase 13 Pro project. But sometimes it may indicate which version, so you may see that. So let me know if that's kind of your question. Okay, hi, how are you doing? Can I rear title? So I think it's whatever the original song was titled in. So if I come over and if I haven't saved a project since like an earlier version, so let's say if I come here, this one is kind of an older project from Cubase 7 still. So, but I saved it in 11.01 was the last time I kind of resaved this project. So you may see. So let me know if that's what you mean by rear title Cubase 13 Pro, or let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, we had Clyde checking in from Italy. Thanks for joining us, and Mario 002 from Romania. Thanks for being online with us. Tim K saying nice international crowd. All right, Great Sea Diamond District Studios from South Africa says, I would like to update Nuendo 14 from 13 Pro. Is there any improvements made to the voice separator and randomizer, etc.? So I don't think that those aspects of Nuendo have changed with that. I don't think that they have. I think that they're going to be the same, but obviously now you get the transcription and, you know, all the new elements that we found in Cubase 14 as well, and kind of the, you know, automation, you know, kind of the automation for dialogue automatically being done as well. Okay, so we see Benny joining from Sweden, and he wants people to bang the like button. Great. Soren asks, huge problems with the chord pad patterns. I need to mail you about it, Greg. I'll do that soon. Yeah, I'll be happy to take a look at it. It says, maybe you'll touch on my question about the mouse over fader to zero that happens to me in Groove Agent Mixer. So I haven't, you know, and I saw the video. I was going to get to it later, but since he asked, that when Soren is in Groove Agent, So let's say if we're in our project and we go to the Groove Agent mixer, what Soren was running into was, we come here into the Groove Agent mixer, that as he hovered the mouse, I could see, and now it's kind of doing it for me as well. So I'm not sure what's causing that. I did send it into the development team, but you can see it's kind of happening to me as well. I hadn't been aware of that, but I haven't gotten an answer back on that. So it kind of seems like a bug, but I'm not sure what's causing that. But hopefully maybe by Friday I could have an answer. But let me know about the chord pad patterns that you have issues with. Thank you for the kind words from Mark Rabin, for expressing his heartfelt gratitude about the live streams. All right, so we see from Val, it says, recently Benny Blanco said in an interview of the question why every song from him from 2010 to 2015 was in 120 BPM. He said he didn't know how to change the tempo, with laughter. Yeah, so for a while they were like, when Cubase was like brand new, they actually kind of did a study at one point of like the top 40 chart, and it was something like 80% of the tracks were at 120 BPM. One interesting thing about tempos I learned, I had a discussion with a wonderful conductor named Robert Shaw. He was kind of a world famous conductor based in the United States. Had the Robert Shaw Chorale, a choral director. And I got to perform with him once when he was a guest conductor. And he told me that tempos will only work in intervals of 4 for some reason. So if you have a tempo of 97, that it won't work, and it should be 96 or 100 or 92. And, but philosophically, you felt that tempos that weren't on an interval of 4 didn't work. So another interesting thing to try in your productions. All right, so we see from Diamond District Studios, how can I listen to my moves while connecting Nuendo to RX Isotope 10 via offline direct processing, currently flying blind. So this might be different. I don't have a Isotope license. Don't even know who to reach out to anymore at Isotope. Used to have friends there. All right, but let's say if I wanted to come over, we'll just open up Nuendo 14 here quickly. Put it in my dock. Okay, so we'll just but I think that there is something slightly different with the direct offline processing. So if we're here, and we go to our direct offline processing, so we'll come here. So let me know, because I think that there is, so the auto apply, will I do that? But I think if let me just drop, let's say, a plugin in here, that we could audition, maybe, I know that we could, see if it's, like if this function here allows you to audition the sound reference. So this setting may do it. I know that sometimes they have, I think, and I could be mistaken because I don't have a license of it, but they're not doing ARA and they have kind of their own thing to kind of get audio back and forth for more complex editing environments. But I think maybe so it might be dealing with the select reference that may allow you to preview. I could do some more research on it and see if I could maybe get a trial version of Isotope to give a better answer. Or if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to help you with that. All right, so at DJ Mixes says, hi Greg, can you show me how to edit the volume in an audio file, Cubase 14 Pro directly, not with the pen? Greetings. Okay, so if we have an audio file here, let me just. Okay, so if we have an audio file here, if you want to edit the volume, so in 14, if you go to the bottom left-hand corner, you could grab the handle. Also, if you hold down Control, so let's say with the object selection tool, so if we hold down Control or Command plus the Shift key, you can just hold the left mouse button down and move the cursor up or down. And if you have the range tool, what you could do with those same keys, you could now come over here and just select a particular region and be able to adjust that region. But if you're in the if you don't want to use the pencil tool, go to your bottom left hand corner and you could grab the fader, or just, I think this was introduced in 1402, that we could just hold down Control or Command and you could adjust the whole clip gain without having to access a pencil tool to do that. And, if you are here, if you wanted to, put in different levels, you could use the pencil tool and just kind of draw in your levels and do Bezier curves with the audio as well, like that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. Okay, so we see Clyde says, I'm rather new to Cubase. Is it possible to insert a master track and apply plugins to it? So everything in Cubase is going to be routed out to like the stereo fader or the stereo out. So if we were to kind of look at a particular project here, so let's say, it's probably not a good example for this, but let me do kind of a simpler project. So let's say all of our tracks here, we go to the mixer, and if it's probably going to defaultly be over to the right hand side. So if I want to come here, and as we're listening to our project, let me just check my connections here. But on this master fader here, this is where you'd be able to adjust all of your different parameters. Let me just try a different project here. Just check my audio connections here. right, should be hearing audio. Let me just check one other thing here. But when we go to your master fader here on the right hand side, here's where you could drop in plugins as inserts. If you're on the main project window, you may see kind of at the top or the bottom like input output channels, and from your input output channels here we could just, you know, here's where we could open up like our master output channel to add plugins on that. All right. Just check my audio interface here real quick. Maybe I'll restart my Cubase, see if it's why it's not seeing it. Maybe I can see if I don't have Nuendo open still. All right. I'm just going to restart my Cubase here quickly. All right, see if I get. All right, that all looks correct. All right, there we go. So we got it woken up. Sorry about that. All right. Okay, so we see Val just says about my quantized question. I have a 65 bar MIDI drum track. I only want every hit near the one to be quantized. Currently going through 101, but maybe the next time if there's a simpler way. So let's, you know, so it's, let's say if I want to take a, let me just come over here. I probably have a long. All right, so let's say if we want to take like this whole piece here, this a Bach cello piece here. Let me just. So if I only wanted to quantize the notes on beat 1, again, it would just go to your logical editor, select, and I'll go ahead and show it just quickly as a macro. So let's say we want to select notes, their position, and we'll say inside bar range. Okay, so I'll save this as a preset. Let's say select notes on beat 1. Okay, so if I do this, we will now, and I could probably in this example make it a little tighter. So now we come over here. We're only going to select notes that are roughly on beat 1. So let's go ahead and make a macro to do this. So we're going to have that saved as a preset. Let's come over here to your key commands. Let's make a macro. So we'll come over here to quantize note on beat 1. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we'll look for select notes on beat 1. We'll add that as a command. Now let's set our quantize value. So let's say we want to set quantize value to 16th notes. Let's add that command and quantize. So add that command. So now if we wanted to just have that as a macro, we could combine those two. So we'll say, okay, now as we come right over here, we're going to take every note that falls on beat 1 and quantize that. So just that easily. So if you wanted to create it as a macro to fire off with a user command, keyboard shortcut, or from your MIDI remote device, we can do it just like that. So let me know if that's still too difficult to do, but I think once it gets set up, you don't have to redo it every time. Okay, you see Val just saying, generally got to get a crash course on the MIDI logical editors. I've done a couple of tutorials on logical editors that like how to get started with it. So, and if you want to email me, Val, I'd be happy to kind of send you that logical editor preset. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. He's shooting off to rehearsal, but he's hoping everyone's doing great. All right, Gareth is telling everyone to not to forget to click the like button. All right. Okay, now I see from Val says, thanks, Greg. That's it. Set it to the range. Yeah. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams on from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you can make it. All right, Duende Media asks, hi all, Greg. It's not using it every day. Often not know which warp types to choose. Please run down the types and specific uses for different warp types or selections. Thanks. So, all right, so the two main ones are going to be whether you want to, you can think of it as like two different ways. Do we want to move the events or do we want to move the measures? Okay, so when we go into our warp tool, we could come over here. So we have warp grid. So what we could do with warp grid is, I could say, let's say we recorded a performance here, and what I want to do, I'll just show it in a different context here to make more sense. Yeah, do this project. Okay, so I'll just hide this particular track now just for demonstration purposes. All right, so when we come over to doing warp, and so we want to do warp grid, I'm going to select a warp tool and we'll select warp grid. So what I could do now is say, okay, in this performance, measure 65 starts here. And what I'm doing is I'm not changing the timing of the audio, but what I'm doing is changing the grid to match the audio. So I can say measure 66 should be right here. So we move, and as we move the time, the tempo changes will automatically be recalculated. So if I come and move this shorter, we have a faster tempo than when I move this bar further away. This will go from 220 to 122 beats a minute. So what this will do is basically, and if we have musical mode, we could have a track here, and if we have it in musical mode, we could have the musical events will follow. So that way we could, if the event is in musical mode, so let me just add like a drum loop here. So let's just pop over here to my media. Let's go to okay, so let's say I have this track is in musical mode. So we'll come here. And now as we do our warp with musical mode event follows, so now as we stretch this out, we could just say, okay, from here to here, that the events will follow. So this track at the top is not in musical mode. So as I move this particular track, we can move the bars to fall into specific parts. But if it's in musical mode, when I move the events here, the events can be updated. So if I grab this bar, we could see that the events will stretch to kind of fit the new tempo. Now the third mode, so those two are basically, we can think of the first one as being we're moving the grid to match the audio. Now if we run into situations where perhaps, let's say if I'm here and I'm like, okay, I was recording and my note came in early or late. So just not quite as tight rhythmically. So let's say. So if I put this with my click. So if I had like an attack on the bass part here that was a little early or a little late, this is when we could do free warp. And what free warp is going to allow us to do is to say, okay, we want to put in like a warp marker, and now what I could do is move this warp marker to say, okay, this is where the start of this note should be. So instead of it being where we listen to our bass part here, I could say this note needs to come in earlier. So now we listen to it. So, at that point, we could rhythmically change kind of the rhythmic placement of notes. So we can say, okay, this note should be stretched out a little longer. So where you had kind of timing issues, we could stretch the audio at certain points to make it fit the grid, whereas the first mode is stretching the grid to make it fit the audio. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Nuendo Media. All right, so we see flat cert. Hi, Greg. After a change of time signature patterns, for instance, NI don't synchronize correctly, the pattern don't start on the 1. Can this be corrected? Greetings from Holland, Rob. So I think not all instruments are kind of set up to do, pattern changes and time signature changes. So just kind of be aware of that. So, if you have a 4/4 and I've seen this with some NI instruments that, some are really designed to not work. If you say, okay, I want to take this pattern and go 3/4 to 4/4 to 2/4 to 4/4 to 3/4 to 1/4, 5/4, it's not going to automatically do that. And that's just a design of how the plugin is reacting to the tempo change. So there's not much we can do in Cubase if the instrument doesn't really accommodate for different meter changes. So you might want to reach out to NI about that. All right. All right, Howard Parker says, I think I know the answer. Possible to run 3 separate concurrent Q mixes using Cubase 14 Pro UR44C. So I think the UR44C has 2 headphone outputs. But I don't think that. Let me just. I'll just look at the UR44C, the back outputs on it, just to make sure. But I think it's only like 4 dedicated outputs, like 2 stereo outputs. Go visit our friends at Sweetwater here. They're always good with. All right, and let me just find the rear panel. So we had the 2 outputs, which I think will defaultly mimic outputs 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So let me just. Yeah, so it's going to be, the main output is basically mimicked by outputs 1 and 2. So there's not 3 separate outputs, or like if you're doing stereo headphone Q mixes, which is probably what we're doing in the studio, you have kind of basically 4, like 2 stereo outputs, even though there's 6 connections. So I think you're only going to get like 2 discrete headphone outputs with UR44C. All right. Sorry, my chat field jumped. Let me find my spot. Lots of questions in my future here. All right, so you see from Mark Raven says, Greg, I have Groove Agent 5 and I use 2 kits because Gerald E. showed me a neato trick using Simon Jazz for cymbals only because they are samples. But maybe after some courses, so see. All right. All right, we see all Michael Team's health tests have come back normal, so that's great. Glad to hear that. All right, so Mark Ravens just says, Greg, my issue, I simply like to jam on a drum beat and play, and sometimes I capture, and sometimes I'm so self-centered that I ignore drums and pay for it later. Yeah, so you could always just kind of, start off, and I think Groove Agent is really well suited for that. So if we come over here and let's say if I just kind of, open up an instance of Groove Agent, I like to, like when I'm starting, and I think, as I mentioned, Groove Agent's like really well adept at this. I may start with kind of a, a generic pattern, and my Groove Agent is kind of a more inspiring metronome for me. So let's say I'll try a different preset instead of using the same one all the time, since everyone's figured out what my favorite go-to preset is. All right, so I'll come over here and let's just say, so now I could start off with a kind of a basic idea. So let's say, okay, maybe I want to try, different preset. All right, so now like with Groove Agent, I'm just going to use this as like an inspirational metronome. So, and the beauty of this is like I could start off with it being kind of very generic, and then I could say, you know what, I want it to adjust the dynamics. I want to adjust the complexity. So you could do like that magical thing of having complex but soft drums or loud, simple drums. So let's say we like this, and I want it to just, every 8 bars do a random drum fill from one of the drum fill slots. And I don't want it to, so we could just adjust our complexity. So I'll just say, okay, every measure, go 1 or 2 levels of complexity, so it's not playing the same thing. So it's not jumping from the least complex to the most complex. I could just kind of come over here and just say, okay, we want to do every bar, go 1 or 2 levels of complexity, more or less. So it's playing something a bit differently. So I could start it very easily, and then I could just add those musical things and capture it and be able to edit the MIDI data and tweak it, but I can still kind of get the inspiration from just having it start and play and follow my transport. Okay, Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, so we have Brian Sawyer checking in from his new home in Yuma, Arizona. We hope you're settling in, Brian. All right, so we see, hello, Greg, my name is Sabi. Please explain how to explode a chord track in Cubase 14 Pro. Thank you very much. Greetings from Hungary. All right, so let's jump over here. All right, so let's say I have a chord track here. I want to drag this down to, let me just select. So drag these down to like Rhodes. All right, so now we have chords. So there used to be like an explode chords function in the score editor, and that's functionality is not in the Cubase 14 score editor. So if we have our chords here, I think we could do it with MIDI logical, like the logical editor. So let's come over here. So we say, okay, we want to, we can say extract to track. So I'm going to, we'll start this process over. So say let's insert, type is equal to note. And I think if we go to context variable, we could say note is equal to like the highest pitch. So when I do this, let me do that within a chord, sorry. Okay, so we could say note number in chord. So, or we can say position in the chord track. So we can say, okay, I want to take like the root note of the chord. I want to take the third, so we can say minor third or major third of the chord. And so we could just kind of extract and then we could extract 2 different tracks just based on this. So if we kind of come over here and say context variable is equal to, and then so what we could choose to do is the number of voices per part, the number of voices in a chord part, note number within a chord, or position within the chord, or different voices, and then you could extract those to different tracks. All right. All right, so Alan from Scotland asks, hi all, Greg, is there a quick way to insert a CC1 value of 100 at the start of MIDI tracks in a project? So one of the plugins that you could use, there's a MIDI plugin that does this really well. So let's say if we want to come over, we'll activate this particular project here, right? And when we go to a MIDI plugin, so we'll see MIDI inserts. So we have a lot of composers that always want to start with like modulation or expression at 100 just so they can hear it. So we'll come to MIDI control. And now at this point, when we go to our MIDI control, we'll say, okay, CC1 modulation, we want to set that to be a value of 100. So we'll come right over here. And now anytime that that track starts to play, it will send out a MIDI CC message on CC1 at a value of 100. So a lot of people will just have these as MIDI inserts on each track. If you're doing a lot of orchestral, like film composition projects where you always want to start at a known value, you could just simply use the MIDI control MIDI insert plugin. And then that way it'll always be present on all your tracks. See, Michael Teams has granted Brian 1 gallon of Texas pralines and cream ice cream for Brian and his wife Melanie. All right, Oniric Productions. Hi, my name is Raul from Spain. Thanks for joining us today. I would like to know is there a way to save a project by automatically naming the folder as same as the project? Thank you very much. So we don't necessarily, it's not going to automatically assume a name, and I think that's good software design where it doesn't assume the name because of the folder, like the project and a folder. To do it, you can obviously do that. So when we're starting a new project, we can come over here. We'll say new projects. I'm going to come over and let's say in my March 25th, I'm going to create a new folder and we'll call it Raul. All right. And then I open. And now if I want to, save the project, I could just call it Raul, and then the project and the folder are the same name. But we may have, Raul 1, Raul 2, Raul March 26th, 7:14 p.m. So, so where we don't want to necessarily always tie the project name to the same name in the folder because it's going to be looking for audio files in a specific path. And if we just happen to save it under a different name, we want it to still be able to access the project folder path for the audio. So we don't have to have, if we have 10 project variations, we don't have to have 10 different folders, 10 different project folders for each of those. So there isn't a way to kind of automatically do it, but if you just kind of set up your project and set it up to, as soon as you set the project folder and then save the empty project with the same name, then you could work that way with probably just one extra mouse click. See, Mark Rabin just says it's also experienced different outputs in Groove Agent after the last update. It renders to left-right unexpectedly now. And there may have been a Groove Agent update with the 14.02. It may have just done it for, and I'll download it for Friday's live stream just to make sure. It may have been just for Windows ARM processors. But I'll see if I'll read through the release notes and see if that makes any difference with maybe the mouse, hovering the mouse, resetting values. All right, wonderful to see Daniel on from Croatia. Great to see you back. I was just saying, we haven't seen Daniel on in a while, so. All right, so got your, just says in Cubase 14, did they fix the mouse hover over the control for third-party plugins, or is that just never going to be possible? So, yeah, I mean, it definitely works with, if it's like where we come over, I probably don't have any third-party plugins, I don't think. Maybe I'll get some soon. But let's say if I add an audio track, let me just... in I think my other computer, I always had one third party just in case. But if we go to EQ, we could see the Curve EQ. That's a third party plugin. So if we want to, so let's set up in my MIDI remote for. So if we want to hover over parameters using my mouse scroll wheel, we could just do that. So not all third-party plugins will respond to that, but as we can see here, so let me know if this is kind of what you want to work with. Not all, the vast majority of third-party plugins do this. There could be some that don't, but let me know if it's just like this is what you mean by hover over the mouse control. The mouse hover over control, and I could get a third-party plugin installed for Friday's live stream just to test. But this is a third-party plugin, so if I come over here and I want to adjust, so there could be some, I think like some Waves plugins in the past weren't responding to mouse hover controls. Okay, so you see Daniel is saying great tips. I wanted to use 95 BPM for his beats, but he's going to use 96 now. So you can see if it makes a difference. But it was an interesting perspective. He was a really fascinating individual. I think he had like 30 Grammys or something. And he was like, when I was in college, he took a lot of time and talked about like recording sessions that he did. And, would share all sorts of like Telarc secrets with me, what they would do. So it was very fascinating. Like, he didn't have to be nice to me at all, but he was. All right, so we see from Rick from Bratman Studio. Hey, Greg, I programmed some drums or loops in Groove Agent 5, and it will say kick, snare, hat cymbals. But I see in the mixer, I'd like to degroup the cymbals, say left and right. Can I do separate tracks? So I don't think that, it's kind of how they're all treated internally. And I think it's, with the cymbals, especially to prevent phase problems, so that it's treated as a single stereo entity. So let's say if we come over, we add a Groove Agent track here. So let's try just like a Simon Phillips jazz. All right, and I'll adjust my tempo. You see Simon Phillips here has his tempo at 168. Interval 4. So let's say if we come over to the mixer. So a lot of these, like the cymbals, I think the intention is so that we don't necessarily have the cymbals go out of phase, that, it's going to be treated as a single stereo entity. Since, the samples are going out of the stereo output. But if you wanted to, so let's say if I was sending my cymbals out, let's say I was playing this and I wanted to have more kind of panning on the cymbals. So if we send this to, let's say, output 3, I could come over here. So now we could have our cymbals, and let's go to our mixer. And if I wanted to adjust the mix console for just the cymbals, let's say we'll mute. And I'll just add some more gain here so you can hear a little better. You know, if we go to the panner and we switch it to the combined panner, that here I could still kind of pan the stereo sources independently, or if we wanted to reverse the panning. So let me know if it's just maybe for the mix or if it's for you need it the left and right channels, but I think it's basically because it's going to be like a stereo source that's coming out and they don't want you to be able to mess it up easily. Okay. All right, so you see Peter T says having a nightmare trying to extract strings done from keyboard on an audio track and figure out what notes are via MIDI. I'm using Spectral Layers Pro 11 and selecting frequencies. Any tips on this? So I may not have anything that's copyright free. You know, so when we do an extraction, let me just let me see. I may have something I could use that YouTube won't ding me on. Let me just. All right, let me just try. Okay. All right, so I'll just take a small section of it for time's sake. So let's say we'll take that, and let me bounce the selection. All right, so we listen to this. All right, so let's see. I know that there isn't like necessarily like a strings part in Spectral Layers, but let's see if we can. Let's go ahead and split this up. And I'll just do it right from here. So let's double click on this and do our unmixing. Okay, so let's say as we we welcome the start of the game. So maybe like here it's going to show up under other on this particular strings part. So if we're to listen to all the different sources. So like when you go to unmix a song, strings isn't like one of the things that's kind of looking for. But what's not included ends up in other, and then we could just kind of so that should be able to maybe help you do, if it's just like a single line, like this is obviously kind of like a counterpart that's going on. If we would take this particular part, let's bounce the selection so that it's just kind of a raw audio file. Then if we go into like very audio, so we'll come over here, double click on the event, and you might be able to, if it's a single line, to just come over here and see the melody in very audio and then be able to extract that to MIDI. So you could give that a try, but I don't think Spectral Layers is looking like in the last version he added brass and horns, but strings aren't something that it's kind of looking at specifically, but you can get an idea probably by isolating it like that. All right, wonderful to see Millard Brown from Pennsylvania. It says, hi, great question. I have a live mix, have not tempo detected, just dropped into a project at default 120 beats per minute. There's an area where I want to quantize the percussion with the drums. Can you demo? Okay, so I'm not sure if if you're adding percussion as a separate track or as a MIDI event. So we'll just go ahead and take like maybe this project here. So let's say, okay, so you haven't done tempo detection. So if it's, so if I was to put something like percussion, so I'm not sure if it's MIDI percussion or audio, but if you wanted to come over here, so let's say if I added like, the full groove agent here, we'll take this, let's add the percussion agent. So I'm just doing this to get percussion sounds in MIDI quickly. So when I do this, it's going to this is following the tempo, but doesn't really have anything to do with but it's not going to be tempo synced. Let's say I'll just choose for this to follow. So if I was to turn this up, let's say, that those aren't going to align until there's a tempo detection. So we'll come here. And we'll say, okay, let's make this 4/4. So now this will align to it. So this instrument is automatically going to kind of be a tempo parasite, if you will. So now this is automatically following the tempo of that. And if I wanted to choose a different pattern here. So if you have the option to do like a quick tempo detection, if it's like something that's going to be MIDI or loop where you know what the tempo is, and you put it into musical mode, that's automatically going to then just follow the track. So if you have the option, Millard, to do the tempo detection, I think it's it can save you so much time. You can see it just takes a couple of seconds to do. All right, so we see John Costigan saying, fascinating story about Robert Shaw. He's a hero of mine. I never heard that tempo explanation. Thanks, Greg. So, yeah, he was a really, really wonderful man. He would kind of spit a lot of people as he was conducting. There was a lot of spit would come out and he'd get into it. So, glad I was in the bass section. But really, really wonderful. I'm so glad I got to meet him. Okay, reading through comments. And we've learned that Mark Ravens, tell Michael Teams that he doesn't, he's the only one in Montana that doesn't own a chainsaw. So. All right. See Da Vinci Girl saying hello again. And Michael Teams has granted Daniela 1 gallon of key lime pie ice cream. All right, so we see IJ just says, hey, Greg, I'm having problems with the chord track when I play an unorthodox chords like flat ninths or an augmented fifth. Cubase changes the chord when I drag the MIDI event into the chord track. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Let me just add a chord track here. Okay, so let's get to the chord pads. Okay, so let's say we do a C. So say a C7 flat ninth. Okay, so drag this to the chord track. All right, so let's say we do a G. Let's see if you're doing, you said augmented fifth. So I guess would that be maybe G augmented 6 chords? So let's say we do something like that, and I drag this out. So let me know, like, if you could let me know, IJ, exactly what the chord spelling that you're doing in here, or if you're just capturing the chord. But let me know if you're defining the chord definition from the chord editor, or if you're playing the chord in And if you're playing the chord in, just let me know exactly what pitches they are, and I could see if I get it to misbehave. But it looks like those two were consistent. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to smash the like button. Okay, John Kutsalinas says, hi, Greg. Greetings from the UK. Thanks for joining us. Great to see Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. All right, I see Jazz do reminders, so I haven't got the trivia prizes. Yeah, I'll follow up, and maybe we're kind of coming up to our end of fiscal year this week. Or I guess it'll be end of fiscal year, so I'll see if that's maybe causing a hold up. I apologize for that. All right, we see Michael Teams has granted myself and my family 1 gallon of fresh Texas blackberries ice cream. Thank you very much. All right, so we see Dallas LaRue just says my Kai Mini Mark III isn't working again. The script is in, the surface is showing, but it doesn't respond. Thanks, Greg. So let me know if it's not responding. It could be, when we go to the MIDI remote. So let's say if I come over here to my nano control, see if, if you go to the, there's different mapping pages, and each mapping page can have a function. So let me know if the keyboard isn't transmitting MIDI, and when you move a fader that you don't see it respond here, if that's when you're saying, if that is the surface showing but it doesn't respond, because usually that could indicate a MIDI communication problem. So let me know if it's not responding when you move faders, like I'm moving these faders on my Korg Nano control, and these are all kind of functioning as expected. So let me know if that's how it's not responding, or if you're not seeing. So it says you see the script, and the surface is showing, and you could also, if we go to kind of the script setup, just to make sure that the correct, just by going to the settings, little cogwheel here, and make sure that you have the right MIDI input and output ports for the Akai mapped. All right, so we see Nick checking in. He's slaving over his score, but he's pressed the like button accordingly. Good luck with the score. All right. All right, John Kutsalinas asks, I was wondering, say I export a file at 32-bit float. Does the session I wish to import said file also has to be 32-bit float in order to import and use the files correctly with? Thanks. So when in Cubase, you could have a single sample rate, but you could have multiple audio file bit depths within the project. So you could have a 16-bit, 20, 24-bit, 32-bit, and if you have the appropriate hardware, 64-bit floating point audio file, and with appropriate hardware, 32-bit integer. So you could have multiple audio file bit depths, but a single common sample rate. So your project could be 24-bit, and you could import a 32-bit or 32-bit float. All right, so we see from P8 who asks, can I export a drum pattern into several MIDI lanes? Right now I can't export stems, which is important to sell the beat. So I'm not sure if you're using the drum machine with the pattern editor. So it's really kind of, is based upon the output routing of the particular instrument. So let's say if I'm here, activate this project here. All right, and I will come over, let's say we have a drum pattern here. Okay. So when we look at this, I'm going to have this particular drum machine instrument. So we'll say, okay, my drum machine, and I'll just turn this up so we can hear a little better. All right, so we have these sounds. So when I want to come over, so when using the drums, if I want to come here, like I say, I want the kicks to go out of their own output. So if we come over here to our group, we could just say, okay, I want these kicks to go out of output 1. So we'll come here. Okay, we'll say output 2 for the kicks, and let's make our snares. Let me just make sure I don't have out of output 3. So say my clap, I'll put it out of output 4. And let's put the hi-hat out of output 5. Okay. And let me just see if I had soloed anything unintentionally here real quick. Okay. Okay, so now let's say I go to my pattern editor and we'll do a new pattern. So we'll come over. All right, so let me just turn the click off and I'll just say, okay, let's. All right, and let's put in like just some hi-hats here. All right, so now we're going to see our hi-hats. Let me just put in kind of Euclidean. All right, so when you go to my mixer, we'll see that these are going to be spread out to different channels. So now when I drag this pattern to my project window here, all right, and we'll repeat it a couple times. So I think if we just come to the edit and go to render in place, we'll go to our render settings and we'll choose complete signal path. That when we render, just make sure I didn't check my render settings one more time here. Okay. So let's see if we convert these all into MIDI and then render in place. All right, let me just listen to it. So I think that we could. All right, I'm just going to check my output routing again here. So let's Go to the drum machine. All right, so let me just make sure I'm not doing a mix down. All right, let me try converting it one more time to MIDI parts. All right, I'm just going to play. Yeah, I think I've done this before and it kind of outputted them separately, but let me just. So let me just say we go back before the render. And let's get to my mix console and I'll just kind of check again. Okay, so it's all being kind of subbed out there. So generally that's kind of the tricky part to do. So let's see if we do an export audio mix down. All right, and here's our hi-hat. So let's just choose multiple. We'll choose our VST instrument track. So let's see if this. So now, so if we just export it, and I think I've gotten it to work. So now, so if you do the export audio mix down, then you could just simply select it under multiple, and then that will automatically export it broken out. But let me know if you're doing a different approach to it, or if it's the drum machine and the pattern editor. Okay. Okay, my Chatfield jump, I'm trying to find my spot. Okay, so you see DaVinci Girl just says this warp mode, it's interesting. Can this be done in older Cubase 12 and how? Can you show it again? In older Cubase, I just did try, but it does not work for me. So I don't have earlier versions of Cubase installed, but again, if you want to warp the grid to say, okay, this is where the measure starts, you can warp the grid. If the event is in musical mode, so if we select the event and place it into musical mode and we choose to warp grid with the musical mode, that as we make adjustments that the audio in musical mode will be adjusted. Or if we're in free warp, we can just come over here and adjust the individual parts to make them, if they're a little off rhythmically. So you see when it turns white, that's the warp marker that we're adjusting right there. And works the same since version 12. See, Michael Team's happy that I was using Dark Glass, which is a Hot Mess song. Yeah, one of my favorites. All right, Anthony Clark is just asking, hi Greg, is there a way to set the new segment future start and end point with warp marker? Because sometimes it's just cutting a syllable from a word. Is there a way to readjust it manually? All right, so let's say if we don't have, so, the warp markers will kind of automatically be created, but let's say if, all right, so it says, is there a way to set a new segment, future start, and end point? So if I'm here, let's say, this is, let's say I have my start and my end point. So if I just grab, let's say I go to my free warp tool here, and I just, put it into free warp, and just kind of, let's say if I just grab like this ending point, if we just have one warp marker, we could just kind of elongate and stretch the whole thing. And if we wanted to conversely kind of drop a warp marker at the beginning, we could, just kind of come over here. So let's say we have a warp marker here, we could kind of reposition all of your different elements rhythmically. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, and have the rest of, if it's more of a free warping. And if you wanted to, if it was not with the free warping, one of the things that you could do also is, let's say if we're in our warp grid. So here we could just say, and I think if we hold down, like, let's say if we're here, and I just check my modifier key. So let's say, okay, this is where measure 32 is. And if we want kind of consistent, so let's say if I make adjustments here, I think it's, let me just find one of the modifier keys, that we could have this kind of be consistent throughout. So if we wanted to, let's say we start over again here, and I wanted to take just these particular bars, and I think it's, I thought it was like shift key, that we could kind of like, as we make an adjustment here, that we could apply that adjustment like throughout the whole project. Let me just see if I could, I thought it was Control or Command Shift, that as we were doing it, let me just try on a different project here real quick. See if we still have the, all right, so say I'll just do new version here. So say we're in, let's say our warp grid. So if I'm here, all right, let's say, yeah, so I'm just holding down the shift key, and we can see that as I, let me know if this is what you want. But if I want them to be like roughly consistent tempos after that, I could just, while holding down the shift key, this will kind of make it the same values, whereas now I could resize. But once, like the first time that you hold down the shift key, that could kind of make the the tempo values consistent throughout the rest. So let me know if I'm completely misunderstanding, Anthony. All right, wonderful to see Vinny Sabatino from Orlando, Florida. All right, so we see, does custom drum map work? I set up for VST drum kit and labeled pitches, showed VST, etc., but to no avail. Only way I could produce drum score is to put each drum part onto wrong something drum part GM. So it's probably, so what I would make sure that you're doing is when you're going into the score editor, so let's say if we're here, and this is in Cubase 14, but if we go to the settings, to instrument settings, and let's say if we're doing, you know, drum kit here, so let's say, okay, I want to, let's say I'll just label this as, so, all right, so say we could do unpitched percussion, and I want this to be like a drum set. We'll choose basic, and then so look into percussion here to see if, you know, if you're using a groove agent kit, for instance, you can automatically create the drum map from the instrument, but you could see the drum map automatically appear here in the instrument settings. So try, if you haven't done that, again in the score editor, when you select the part, come here to the settings, to the instrument settings, and then you could, you know, create the drum map automatically from Groove Agent, or you could load up your custom as opposed to your GM map here. So make sure that the drum map is matching right there. Let me know if that makes sense. All right. So we see from Alan just saying, great, Greg, thanks. Okay, so we see Mark Rabin just says, Greg, my Groove Agent 5 outputs have been wonky lately. I set them in the mixer, etc., and sometimes it renders, and sometimes it surprises me lately. I'm trying 2 kits and 2 Groove Agent 5s with assigned outputs. All right, so let's give it a shot. Sorry, let me just... Okay, we'll do full Groove Agent. So do basic kick snare outs here. Okay. So go to the mixer. So let's look at our mixer as we make these changes. So we'll send our kick out of output 1 and snare out of output 3 and everything else out of our main stereo outs. Alright, and I'm going to just drag this pattern over, let's say to our project here. Alright, so let's see, now we're going to do just 1 kit and let's render in place. And we'll choose our complete signal path here. Alright, we're not mixing down. Yeah, so it seemed like that was... yeah, let me just check my output configurations as we play it back. So it seems like to me that in previous versions that would render to separate tracks. Make sure it's not active, but I could play around with it and see if that's, report the issue if it's acting up. We just try the render place one more time here. Yeah, but it seems like that should, with the multiple outputs, render. So I'll look into it and send an email about it. Seems a little strange. But let me make sure I have the latest Groove Agent version here. I may have to update it. Let me just check just to, because there might have been an update with the 1402. All right, so it's 1402, 240. No, it's 5210. Let me just see if I go to the download assistant. I may not have. All right, I'll just check under VST Instruments. Yeah, I'll do some investigation with that, but yeah, it seems like it's not working as I would expect, Mark, as well. So. All right, so we see from clarification from Got Yours is about the mouse hover over using a controller. Question from earlier: I was using a Windows Surface dial with Elephant software, worked on everything, but now switching to Mac, it's not supported. So wondering if they fixed that in 14 Pro, or is it just the same as 13 Pro, because none of my third-party software works with the mouse hover. So it seems like, I know, like on my Windows platform, I will see if I could get some plugins, a third-party plugin installed, but it's, I think most plugins work. So let me know if it is. So I'm not sure if there's changes with that, or if you're still using the Surface Dial on your Mac, but you see it's not supported. So I'm wondering if they fixed it. So maybe the Surface Dial is not transmitting. So see if you do that function in so I'm not sure if if you set up the Surface Dial as a remote control with that function, or if it's just natively the Surface Dial does a mouse scroll wheel functionality. So, or if you kind of natively and it's not working in Mac OS, or if you configured it in the MIDI remote itself. So if you want to come over here and say, okay, let's go to, I want this knob to function on as if you mapped it here. So you go to mouse pointer AI knob, and now, you know, once I have this set up, I can hover over any parameter here. So, and whatever parameter I'm on, it's going to adjust. So let me know if you have your controllers mapped through the MIDI remote, or you're just expecting it to work natively with that. So. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely on from Martinez, California. All right, Sium Fashaye says, hi, how can you help me, please, how to open workspaces? So if you want to, you know, just come over here and, you know, see workspaces, you could open them from the, you know, workspaces menu here. So let's say if I have, you know, a couple of virtual instruments open, so I want this with all the outputs, I could save this workspace, and we could save workspaces. So we click on add workspace, we could save it to a global workspace, or if I'm not using Groove Agent, everything, I may want to just have it in a project. So we'll say, okay, open Groove Agent. Let's see. All right, let me just reopen that. I'm just going to open while I'm here. Let me just see if I need to update my, if I have Groove Agent updated. So I'm going to reinstall Groove Agent here while we're out and restart my Cubase and see if that makes a difference with some of the things. Maybe I didn't have the latest one installed. Just give this a second, I'll restart. All right, wonderful to see Best Korean Jesus on. We have Recyclop checking in from Finland. Best Korean Jesus from San Diego area. He says he's been getting back into music, so it's wonderful. Okay, so, and we see a question from Greg Nobles. Hey, Greg, when re-recording a MIDI part, let me just get my Cubase open here. All right, so we see, hey, Greg, when re-recording a MIDI part, the notes seem to be replaced, but it seems like CC data is not, i.e. CC11 data, having to completely delete the portion after the punch point to make it work. All right. Okay, so let's say if we have, I'll just come over, let me just come over here real quick. Okay, so let's say I'm going to write in some MIDI CC1 data here. So I think you would need to have the editor open for this. So let's say, okay, so we have some CC1 data. I'm going to record some of the CC1 data and merge it into, I'll set my MIDI record mode here to merge. Okay, so I'll come here. We'll just, I'll hit record. All right, so we've now kind of overwritten. So let's say I want to write new data here. So let's come over, and we want to make sure that we do this in the MIDI editor, and that what we want to do is to So we're going to enable record in MIDI editor, and I think if we come over, it's going to be a preference that's going to need to be activated as well. So let's say, and okay, and then we'll see this replace recording in editors. So if you go to editing to MIDI, so now we're going to come over here and we're going to choose to replace controllers. Okay, so now I'm going to overwrite the existing controller data. So let me just put it in record here. So now we could just overwrite that data. So activate record while in the editor, come over to the settings or preferences, and then you'll see the record MIDI and replace recording in editors. You want to replace the controller data. All right, Millard Brown has just a clarification with his previous question. It says, regarding the previous quantized question, it's a multi-track send from the board. And I recall there's a way to create a groove from the drums and then quantize to that. Is that possible? All right, so if we have, let's come over and we'll just do a quick, like a multi-track drum. So we want to make a groove from it. So I'll come here and I'll just take a couple tracks, like maybe a kick, snare, and hi-hat. So I'm gonna come over here. Just okay. So let's say I want to do kick, snare, and hi-hat. So I'm going to take just these three and kind of merge them together in one, just so we get kind of a quick groove of it. So take those three tracks and let's do a render in place. So we're going to mix down to one file. Okay, so now let's say we have like just a rough kick, snare, hi-hat. So this would probably give us a good idea of the groove. So if we come over, let's say, okay, I want to take this particular part of the groove. So I want to take like this part here. So what we're able to do is, let's say, okay, I want to take these 2 bars of this groove. All right, I'm going to split that, and just for kind of simplicity's sake, I'm going to do a quick bounce selection of the file. Now when I come here, I could go to my hit points, and we could kind of see the hit points in the particular project. So we can see our hit points here for our kick and snare. So we listen to it again. So now when I open up my quantize panel, I could just come over and from the sample editor, double click. We'll see under the hit points tab, a create. And now we could say just create, we'll just see create a groove. So now when I create that groove, it's added into my quantize panel, and then I could quantize other tracks to match that particular groove. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Millard. Eric Fox asks, hello, Greg. Is there a key command to rename all the events by track names all at once. So I think it might be one at a time, but let's give it a shot. So let's say if I come here, if you don't know this, and I name the track this, I hold down the command or control key and hit enter, that it renames the events. But I don't think it's going to work for multiple events, but let's give it a shot. Okay, so let's say I come here. Let me select these, because I think the naming field, so let's say if I rename this to 1, 2, because I think the naming field needs to be active, and I think we could only have one active naming field at a time. So, but let me see if maybe if we link the channels. Yeah, I don't think it's going to. Okay, so let's say if we link these. Yeah, because this like naming field, I think, has to be active for that to translate over. So now if I come here, we could, rename that event, but I don't think, since there's only one naming field that could be active at a time, that you have to kind of do it one at a time to do that. So, but if you have a track, here's a tip. So let's say you give this a name, and let's see if we hit enter. Yeah, so I think it's going to be one at a time, because that way we're not renaming multiple tracks kind of accidentally at the same time, because the multiple tracks are selected. All right, so we have Canal Jacinto Real Estate saying hi. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. Says from Canal Jacinto Real Estate. How do I delete bars with MIDI and audio data in a Cubase project if there are more than 100 tracks? Okay, so what you could do is come over, and you want to globally. So an easy way to do is, let's say if we have a marker set up here, I'm going to select this marker, and I'm going to create just a quick cycle marker here, but in the area that I want. So I'm going to add a cycle marker. Let me just stop the divide track list here real quick. All right. All right, so it used to be like with their. All right, so let's add a cycle marker. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm just going to, with the range tool in the cycle marker track, I'm just going to double click. Let me just see. So let's grab the range tool, double click, and that's going to select everything in that particular range for us. We could manually do this as well. And let me just check, see if there's because it used to be, maybe I modified the keyboard shortcut for this, but let me just, it might have changed with some new functions. All right, let me just get to the range tool, because there is a select full vertical. Okay, now it's Option Shift. So also, if you just hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, so we don't have to do necessarily the marker thing. So you could disregard that, but try Alt or Option plus Shift with the range tool. That will globally select everything here. And now what we could do, whether it's audio, MIDI, automation, tempo, go to your range function, and we will choose to, we could say delete time. And now everything, so if we come over here, let's look at the full track. We'll see all these tracks when we have that range selected. So Alt or Option plus Shift, and we'll take that range and cut time, and you see how everything moved over to the right. So if we undo and redo, so we could completely globally cut that. So with the range tool, hold down Alt or Option plus the Shift key, select the range, and then you could just go to your range menu here, and there's different range functions. So if you wanted to hit like Shift plus backspace, you could just delete that particular time. So give that a try. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have Bo checking in, I believe from Denmark, if memory serves me correctly. And Dallas LaRue just says, what plugins in Cubase would be best for creating music for television? It could really depend on, for kind of bread and butter sounds, I think Halion Sonic is a great choice. Like if you go through like this Halion Sonic collection, so let's say if we go to add our instrument here, there's a lot of, and television can be kind of very broad as well. But if you come over, like doing like an hour drama series versus a reality TV show, but if you, kind of come over here, let's say, you get all sorts of great stuff, so there's lots of people that will make a living, just coming up with, like very, atmospheric, like I just need. And if we layer that with a pad, I could, come over here. Let's just put a different voice into slot 2. So, if we want to go to different synth pads as well, so let's do maybe a synth comp, and we'll put this on patch 2. So if I were to play both of those together, come over and say, okay, these are both on MIDI channel 1, and I want this one to be transposed up an octave, So we'll drop that down to its original pitch. So you could use sounds like that. So, TV could be incredibly broad. And if you're looking for like a really atmospheric instrument sound where you can kind of play one note and, maybe have a score for like kind of like a subtle under, like just for like a quick sound design, like if you're doing a sci-fi type thing, you could definitely kind of check out Pad Shop. We'll give you lots of options that could evolve over a long period of time. So if you say, okay, let's just come over to just open up just a preset here. Say, okay, well, where one note can just kind of continually evolve. So, like a lot of TV people use stuff like this. Like I was just watching Silo with my son and wife last night. So just holding one chord, you could create kind of a whole sound design atmosphere using some of those tools. And if you're doing more traditional orchestral stuff, Iconica Sketch. All right. So Casanova Frankenstein asks, I don't know if you guys have already talked about this. I wonder how, after quantizing an audio file, is it possible to move single aspects in this audio file, or do I have to cut the different parts, and how to do that? And just apologies, sorry for the long questions. You can ask as many questions, whatever length you want. So this is really kind of getting down to, as we were showing just a bit earlier, using like the audio warp. So instead of having to cut a zillion things, you can come over here, and if we go to our free warp, you can just say, okay, I need to select this. I'm going to put, I could click to put like a warp marker. So let's say I want to put warp markers. Okay, I'll just do it on a fresh project here, just so we can see. All right, we'll try it here. So as soon as we want to, we can move stuff that's been kind of quantized. Like if you have vocal performance, that's, you want to move like a particular word or syllable, we could again come right over here to our free warp tool, select that, and now we could just kind of put in different warp markers and move those events. And you want to make sure that when you do this, that you have like a warp marker afterwards, because if you don't have a warp marker afterwards, this could, if you have just one warp marker, you could say, okay, I grab this, and that's going to move everything after that point or up until the next warp marker. So if I want that to stay in place, I can move this warp marker and not affect everything from the next warp marker onward. So you just kind of click, and then we could have and then you could just reposition your events very easily without having to cut them. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. You see Fred Corey's on. We'll get to his questions here in just a little bit. And Fred Corey may be able to help with television stuff. He does great work on a TV show called The Ark on Sci-Fi Channel in the States. All right, so we see from Edward. It says, hello, Greg. I recently encountered a problem when opening a project from Dorco in Cubase. The tracks open as MIDI without instruments. Is that how it should be? So currently it's going to, I think when you import the track, it's not going to load up all of the instruments, but all the data so that you could reassign it. So I don't think like the mixer settings are carried over. It's just really intended to, when we go to, and this was introduced in 1402, when we come over here and we import the Dorco project, that I think it's just a single flow as well. I think we'll see more integration coming, but they just wanted to be able to kind of choose to, get the Dorco data in, and then you could remap instruments, because often people are kind of using different instruments when they're collaborating back and forth. Okay. See, John Costigan's going to dash and update his insurance. So he's going to be back for the heavy pyro and 4-color laser finale for today's live stream. All right. All right, so we see from not 27. Hey, Greg, can you explain the difference between groups and folders? How do I do summing on buses the right way, and which type is useful just for organizing tracks? So if we think of groups and folders, so, well, sometimes people will, you know, kind of use those together. You know, when we have folders, we can think of folders as being more for organization. So when we want to organize different aspects and, you know, have folders and subfolders and all my drums here, but we realize that, you know, folders, you know, aren't intrinsically linked to like an audio output. So, you know, a folder, while people often take contents of a folder and group them, but, you know, folders can contain chord tracks. Folders can contain, you know, tempo tracks, you know, information that doesn't have any sound. It doesn't generate audio. There's no audio sources in it. So, you know, if I wanted to take, we'll take a look at this example. Okay, I want to take my drums here. So let's say, I'll just, okay, so I want to take all of my drums here. Let me just, and this project from Fred Corey. All right, so I take all of my drums. All right, so these, I currently have these in a folder. So if I want to see all of my drums, I can come right over here. Now, if I have these outside of a folder, there is a macro that's included with Cubase. So let's say I don't have this folder track at all. So we'll go ahead and remove my folder track. So if I wanted to put, so again, my drums folders are just going to be strictly for organization tasks. Now, if I wanted to do a folder and assign multiple tracks to a folder and a bus at the same time, we can come right over here to edit to macros. And let's say I want to, we'll say selected tracks to new folder and add a group channel. So I'll come over here, we'll name our group channel. And now all of my drums are in a folder with the group channel in the folder, and the group channel is named. So now all of my drums can come and be processed through the drum bus or the drum group. But again, folders are going to be for kind of organization. So when you have, you know, 700, 800, 4,000 tracks in your template, you know, you may not want to constantly scroll, and you could have folders with subfolders within folders. And again, a ruler track, a tempo track, a chord track could be in a folder. So those don't pass audio. So there's not necessarily where stuff in a folder has to go through the same bus or group. But you can do that with a macro if you want to. So, you know, we think of groups as being, you know, for like collectively handling, you know, doing audio processing or collectively working with the sound, and a folder is collectively working with multiple tracks together. So they're not intrinsically tied. They can be, but we don't want it to be limited to being tied together. All right, so Fred Corey's question says, hi, Greg, is there a way to prevent media bay from playing after I select an instrument? For example, I select a trailer, hit instrument, it still plays from the media bay and from my project window. All right, so let's take a look. So let's say I want to do, let's go over to media bay. Let's go to, and let's see if it's, okay, so in instrument sound. All right, so let's say we go here to Hallian, and so I'm not sure if it is like a VST instrument that you're previewing. Okay, so let's say I'm previewing this. I come. just select a different sound to preview. Okay, it says so probably. All right, so right now I think I may have this on autoplay results. So let me see if I turn off this little icon here. So now if I play, let's say we preview sound here. All right, let me see if that's. All right, so I select a different sound. Okay, so Fred says, want to prevent media bay playing after I select an instrument. Example, I select a trailer hit instrument, it still plays from the media bay and from my project window. All right, so let's say if I double click on this now, it's going to load the instrument. All right, so, and let's say if we sequence, so now it's just playing the instrument, but it's not previewing. So I'm not sure if it's like maybe the focus is still in the media bay here, Fred, as opposed to, so like when I double click to load an instrument, and maybe if I come over and I just click on the project window, that the focus is now on the project window as opposed to the media bay preview. So check to see if, so now we're not getting the preview because and we can see the outline, and you can just kind of hit the tab key. So let me know if it's, see if maybe you think it might be like a focus issue with that. All right. All right. We have just stuck MIDI notes. Let me just. All right. All right, so we see Casanova Frankenstein just says perfect, thanks a million. We see Da Vinci Girl says thank you very much, Greg. And Pastoral Apologetics is excited and determined in Southeast Texas. All right, so Fred Corey just says, I'm trying what you're doing now with the free warp and can't get it to free warp. Okay, so one of the things that could make a difference when doing free warp is if it's, so, again, the warp is going to have different modes. So let's say if I wanted to just take, and we could do this across multiple tracks. So let's say in Fred's recording here, I wanted to do this across multiple tracks. I go to my free warp mode. And one of the great things is, Cubase will automatically figure out what the hit points are of audio as it's recording. And if we go to your audio to real-time processing, so let's say if I select these events, these tracks here, and we go to audio to real-time processing, we can say create warp markers from hit points. And sometimes we may not necessarily see the warp markers that are in a particular project depending on the zoom level. So if we're in our free warp, and we could also, another way of doing this is to take our hit points and say, okay, we want to find our hit points for our different tracks here. So we'll say, okay, let's double click here. We see our hit points, and then we could also create warp markers for our hit points. So double click, go to the sample editor. You'll see this little create sub tab here. So we're going to take our hit points and convert that to warp markers. Now when we go to do free warping and we have our tracks selected, I could come over here, and you notice that at a certain zoom level, when free warp is turned on, that you won't see any of the warp markers because it could be just like a big mess of yellow warp markers. So you may have to zoom in. And now that we've done this, we can say, okay, I just want to take this and let's move this kick drum hit earlier. Let's move this one later. So as you see, it will kind of turn to a white color, indicating that we're moving all these. And if multiple tracks are selected, we can come over and just kind of warp. So if you just had like one drum hit that was like annoyingly late or early, you could just shift it just like this for multiple tracks as well. Or if you wanted to place the warp marker, or I think if you hold down Alt or Option, you could erase the warp marker if you don't like that particular warp marker, and then you could freely just kind of reposition the audio. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Fred. If not, I could do a quick demo remotely on your computer, maybe tomorrow. All right, DaVinci Girl asks, can you install for future Cubase 12? I'm sure not to be the only one that did not upgrade just because workflow did not change and no backwards compatibility. So, I mean, if you have a Cubase 14 license, you could run Cubase 13 and 12. So you would just have to download it and install it if you have a appropriate license for it. All right, so we have Sway TV and Recording Studio saying hi from Jersey. All right, from northern New Jersey. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you on. All right, so we see from Anthony Clark, just says, my bad, I meant the automatic segment detection function. Is there a way to set manually the start and end of the detection? As sometimes it cuts some syllables from a word that shouldn't. Okay, sorry for misunderstanding. So let's come over here and say, okay, we're going to do our editing. So let's say we have our range tool selected, and as we come over here, so I think, let's see if this is actually maybe based on hit points. So let's say if we come here to measure 18, and let's do, because this may be based on hit points, I'm not sure what it, yeah. So I understand sometimes when we go to, and this is kind of a great function where you could say, okay, I just want to look at and select different parts, so I could adjust the volume up and down. So I'm holding down the Control or Command key, but if we wanted the beginning phrase there, so I don't think that there's a way to select kind of the next segment. I haven't found a way yet. I could see if I could get some clarity on it, but let's say, okay, if we're at 18, and we're here, if it's following hit points, and if we adjust the hit points, if that makes a difference. So let me just, we'll double click here, or I'll just drop in. I'll make some hit points and see if it follows that. Might be easier. Okay, so I'm going to just adjust the hit points here so that it is showing less. So let's go into the sample editor. So I'm just going to double click. So we'll come over to our hit points and say, all right, so we see where our hit points are in the file. So if I come and hold down Command Option Shift with the range tool, yeah, so it doesn't look like, so I'm not sure kind of, if it seems like it would make sense that maybe it would follow the hit points and then you can make adjustments based on that. But if you want it to just kind of take like both of these words at the same value, so I haven't found a way to kind of like maybe there's a keyboard shortcut I haven't discovered to select the next or previous node for the volume changes, but I'll ask about it regardless. And while we're here, I just figure I would check to see if my Groove agent is misbehaving with now that we updated it, see if that makes any differences. If when we hover, that stuff is misbehaving in the mixer. Yep, that went up. Yeah, it's a strange one. All right, I'll make sure to pass that along so Steinberg knows. All right. See, Michael Teams just saying free warp seems to be the problem today. I admit I have problems with it also. Perhaps it's the amount of steps required to get the free warp part. Just saying. So. All right, so JVI just saying evenings and sending greetings from Rome, where you ran a marathon last weekend. Congratulations. It'd be a beautiful city to run a marathon in. JVI says it's weird to be watching when you're not behind a PC with Cubase. There's a lot of people watch it on their TV through like a Roku or an Amazon like Fire Stick, like a streaming device. So I think it's like 14 or 16% of people watch it just on their TV. We see Pertico Menon has the flu, so we hope you feel better. It's a bummer. All right, so we have Baini Siame from Tanzania. He's watching the Cubase stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, so you see Greg Noble says, thanks, Greg. Is this a new thing in Cubase 13? Before I could play using expression pedal at the same time, and the recording part is just replaced all the data. So it could be, I think it's been in maybe since 9-ish, 8.5 or 9, when the behavior changed. So maybe it was a preference that you just kind of set and forgot about it, and it just kind of carried over. Okay, so we have Bone Splitter just says, hi, Greg. How do you automate or remove automation in Xtreme? So let me see if I have that installed. I may not. Maybe one of the things I'm still going through stuff on my new computer I haven't installed. So let's see if I did Xtreme. I don't think so. Let me see if I could download it quickly. I think I have a license for it, so I should be able to. All right, I'll come back to that while it's downloading and installing. Let's see if there's another quick question. All right, we have Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas. We see Tim Weinheimer is having YouTube eating his comments in the chat today. We're glad he made it. All right, we have Cornell from the Netherlands. All right. All right, so we see Mark Rabin's going out with his dog Stella. All right. All right, so let me see if I could get Xtreme to show up here real quick. May have to restart my Cubase, but let's see, maybe we can refresh Media Bay. All right, let me just take a look at my downloads area here. Maybe I could just get it reset. See if we get. All right, let me just see if I could just restart my Cubase real quick and see if we get it to catch the extreme. Not I can cover it on Friday's live stream, but let's see. All right, so here's Extreme. And this is another great instrument, depending on. Okay, so we see how do you automate or remove automation in Extreme. All right, so let's say I'll just kind of record this particular instrument. So I'll record and automate at the same time. So I'm going to just click on the W and R button. All right, so I recorded the one note and I just kind of placed it, all the automation on. So we have our one note here and we could see the various parameters that I've automated and say, okay, if I wanted to move this automation earlier in time or later in time or copy it, hold down the Alt or Option key. And if you're wondering how the automation parameters automatically showed up, so I just automated it into parameters. And if we go to your automation settings, you could reveal the parameters on right. So now we can see each of the automation parameters will automatically appear as soon as they're written. So let's say we're automating again here. If I adjust a different parameter, these automation tracks will just be added as we're automating. So that's how you can do it. Okay. See, Nat 27 says, Greg, thank you so much, Greg. All right, you're welcome. All right, so we see from Val, it says, any tips on making expression maps with VSTs that have the switches on keyboard notes like C0, B0, and C6 to B6? Are they pre-made? It's an ample acoustic guitar. So, it's really, it's one of those things that you may like put off creating for a long time. But to do like an expression map is, it's really just kind of come over here and say, okay, go to your MIDI menu to expression map setup. We will say, okay, let's come here. We want to, use key switches. And then we could just say, okay, I want to do like, let's say 6 or 7 slots. For this particular slot, it's going to be, this channel, this pitch. So you could just kind of come over and just, set, your different articulations here. So what the remote key is, so say, okay, C0, we'll send to slot 2. That's going to be, and you could create your own name, if you wanted to add a custom articulation or use one. So I think making it, it's one of those things that you put off for like hours or weeks, and then when you actually do it, it's like, oh, it took 5 minutes to make an expression map, and then you could tweak it and modify it. I'm not going to use those expressions, I'm going to use these, etc. So okay, so we see nice comments from Fred. All right, so we have Mark Kiambos has been a silent watcher for a while. Glad to be watching from Nairobi. Thanks for joining us. And it's great to see you kind of pop in and say hi. It's always great for me to kind of envision who I'm talking to in different parts of the world, so I could try to make it a personal experience for everyone as much as I can. All right, Mark Kiambo just says, quick one. I have a Panorama P4 MIDI controller. Every time I switch it on, Cubase crashes in C12, C13, C14. Anyone else experience this? So I have a Panorama P4 controller is what I'm using for all of my live streams, so I haven't had any problems. I use it on my PC as well. One thing that may cause, if you have the ability to externally power it, sometimes if you're running a lot of, like I have one device when I connect it to my PC, because my PC is kind of hidden in a closet, we'll call it my machine room, but it has a much longer USB extension. So I have one device that on the long USB cable doesn't have enough power, and that could cause everything to be very lethargic and can cause crashes because it doesn't have enough power in a USB bus. But when I started to externally power that, so see if you connect like the little 5-volt power, which powers if that makes any difference for you, or if you connect it to a powered hub, or to a different USB port on your computer itself. Okay, so we see with Bone Splitter, just says, hi Greg, what I meant with the extreme question is, how do you remove the modulation or automation in existing presets with Extreme? All right, so let's take a look. I haven't used it in a while. So let's say if we come over here, all right, let me just load up a different patch here. So I'm not sure if it's doing, let me just, if it's doing like, I'm not sure if it's like a traditional modulation matrix, or it's just kind of how the sound is evolving, because usually, maybe if we come over here to the, okay, so go to the matrix here, and then maybe what you could do is just simply remove your modulation matrix right from here. So, or go to your step modulator. So if you wanted to come over, there's also LFOs. So you could try to simply, if you click on the different parameters here, to make sure that those are enabled, disabled. right from within the instrument. All right. So we see Val says, thanks, I'll try and make one. The only thing I don't get here is with the minimum maximum note. Also, does it send them to any MIDI send? So it'll go out, like when you go to an expression map, I'll just show, like, and if it's a Hallian-based instrument, you could have it automatically. Let me just open up a quick project here. Okay, so let's say I want to come over to, let's say, this cello sound. So we'll just deal with the cello. All right, so when we come over here, I'm going to go to, so we'll go into, we'll make this kind of full screen editor. So we'll go to our expression map. So if it's a Hallian-based instrument, one of the cool things is you can just go to import key switches and it will automatically do that. So, you know, the minimum and maximum pitch, this isn't necessary. This will be like the, you know, right here is the key to see what is the key switch. So you just set that there, and you could filter the key switch to only affect notes like, okay, I don't want to do pizzicato on the very top notes on a violin. So if you wanted to restrict a particular articulation to different note ranges, you could do that. And then you also will have just a setting here to be aware of is just direction or attribute. So an attribute can be applied to a particular single note, and a direction would maintain that articulation until another articulation is introduced to change the existing articulation. So, you know, open up a Hallian-based instrument, like even if you go to Iconica Sketch, go to within the MIDI editor to note expression, and you could just really kind of mimic this. So, you know, we have, let's say, 8 expressions. You just add 8 slots, enter in your MIDI note here. You give it a description. You could give it a color, so that each articulation could be different colors, and whether you want it to be an attribute or direction. So I have confidence that you could do it. Or you see Mark Chiambo says he'll try to connect to the Zoom calls one of these fine days. They happen when it's late here, but let me purpose to attend ones. Yeah, we'll be doing our Zoom meetup this Friday. So. All right, so we see Anthony Clark question, how to set up a MIDI note to activate and deactivate a gate plugin, and what is the difference between triggering it through a MIDI note and automating it? So, you know, automating it, you can't necessarily play it in real time like you could from MIDI. So if you wanted to almost have a performative aspect to it, but let's say if we want to put a gate on a particular track, so I'll just come here, I'll just put a gate on a particular element. So there is a plugin that is a MIDI gate that responds to MIDI. So let's say I want to take this drum loop here. Okay, so let's say I'll just put on the listen bus here. All right, so I'm going to come over and let's go to the inserts, and under dynamics we'll see MIDI gate. Okay, and what we need to do now is just to add a MIDI track, and its output is going to be going to the MIDI gate. So I think if we just look at it, so we'll see our MIDI gate here. All right, so I'm going to add that track. So now when I just play any MIDI note, so I hold the note down, it plays. I'll do this with the virtual keyboard. So we don't hear the drum loop now, but when I play note, it opens. So, and if you want it to be note off, so we can come over here. So now is, we could come right over here and choose for it to be note on or note off. But as we do this, we could just set up the MIDI gate, add a track, set its output to the MIDI gate, and then as you play, you could just turn the gate on or off from MIDI messages right there. So play around with that. You could automate a gate, but what's cool about the MIDI gate is that you could take an existing MIDI track and send that out to, so if you have like a special rhythm, like and you wanted that to open up the gate on a particular device, it's probably easier just to copy those MIDI notes to a track that's outputted to open up the MIDI gate versus kind of drawing in automation rhythmically, which is great if you get paid by the hour. But if you wanted to get stuff done creatively, you could just copy an existing MIDI track and be able to open up the gate from the MIDI message. Okay. See, Val's just saying, okay, at least someone believes in me. Yeah, I know you could do the expression maps. So if you do a Google search, you could probably find an expression map for the ample sound stuff. All right, Will Human just says, how would I go about applying note scales to a 16-pad controller, much like how MPC software allows A, C, or F sharp to be applied to the correct scale to be played pad for pad. So Cubase is going to accept the MIDI information coming from a controller. But it's, if you wanted to map the pitches on what the controller is transmitting, that's often going to be done at the controller itself. So Cubase can accept whatever is coming in. Now, if you wanted to filter notes out of a particular key, I think if we come over, so let's say if I just have any controller, so let's say if I'm listening to this. All right, so let's say I want to come over to, we'll say the Rhodes. All right, and we wanted to filter out particular notes. So, a lot of times, like the MPC software, it's the controller that's transmitting only particular notes. If we come over to, let's say, an event here, and we open up, like, let's say the MIDI editor. So let's say I want to take like this MIDI event here. There is a scale assistant. So if we come over to the scale assistant, we could say, I think that this is going to be, we could actually it could give suggestions. So we could come over here, and we could do like a quick analysis. So we could say, okay, I want to use our scale suggestion. So we could say, okay, we want to be, so we could do that directly here. We could also use the chord track as the basis, but now we could actually kind of set a scale, and then we could come over here and just see. All right, so we could say we want to snap live input. So if I'm in the key of D major and I play an E flat and an E natural, they're going to sound the same pitch because it won't let me play out of this defined key. So that could be a way to do it. Is just go into like the MIDI editor, into the scale assistant, and once you have that scale. But as far as like, if you wanted the pads to be mapped out, just like a drum machine, when we come, you could respond directly, to the drum machine. You could but it's what is being kind of transmitted out of the controller that's there. You may be able to, if we take incoming MIDI notes, I don't think that would work, but it's really, set it up in the scale assistant and define the key, and then your drum pads are only going to play in the right key. If you wanted like the same scale steps for different keys on the pad, so the fifth is always here from the root, the major third is always here from the root, then that would be a template that's going to be set up in your MIDI controller as to which notes are being transmitted out. So all right, Cycling is Awesome says, what is the best way to send a track to a bus? If I send effect or change the stereo out of the track of the bus, is it a problem to send a track to several buses? So either way, so sometimes when, you may want to, you could get the track to the destination. Some people, there's some scenarios and mixes where maybe you send it to like a different bus, like a parallel bus in the chorus to make like the chorus sound bigger and have a contrast with the verse. So if that's the case, you may want to take, so if we have a bus, so say I want to take my drums and we have a group track here, that, if we wanted to, go to the bus here via Ascend. So it's really the same. It's two different ways of doing it, but with a send, we could choose to have varying amounts of this, and we could automate that. So we say, okay, if I wanted to send this out to a parallel bus only in the choruses of the song to give it a little extra oomph, we could automate that. Whereas if it was going out to the group from our main output, that wouldn't allow us to have varying degrees. So either way, I think sends can give you more flexibility, and you could route to up to 8 different buses or groups using sends. So it's, if you want a little more flexibility, sends could do that. And if you're using 8 effect sends for your audio tracks, for reverbs and delays, then it may make more sense to use the outputs or direct outs. So either way, we'll get you there, and you could run multiple groups from one track via sends. All right. Wonderful to see Graham Witcher on. Yeah, and we see he's just make a comment about the Stay Home presets, which is like a pad shop library that Gary Gibbons put together with some other sound designers during kind of when the pandemic was kicking in full swing, which is a really wonderful project for him to do and give it away to help people stay home. So we see from Val just saying, yes, it's an ample acoustic guitar. I need lots of funky, popish, and finger-style stuff from it. So this expression map is big, I guess, or do people just kind of do it in piano rolls? I think, like I was just helping someone remotely, and they were using the ample, and once they kind of saw the flexibility of the expression maps and being able to edit and move the notes around without worrying about the notes triggering different expressions and not accidentally transposing the articulation note, that they were kind of sold on the workflow of the expression maps. All right, so we see Daniel Nicholas just wanting videos in Spanish. It's easier for him to understand. So probably not if I spoke in Spanish, but I think that you can do like the different subtitles in different languages as well, if that's helpful. All right. Let's see, just comment from Strict 9 says, if I knew all this was going to be such a headache, I would never started making music. So it's, it's just, we could do so much. It used to be, like in the old days, like, when I worked in studios, there was, a producer that made the decisions, an audio engineer that got everything set up. There was an assistant engineer that helped the audio engineer in case he wasn't familiar with the patch bay and all of the equipment. There was full-time maintenance staff. The assistant engineer had an assistant that would do tape calibration, that would do SSL recalls, that would go out and get food for people. And then there was an artist, there was a songwriter, there were performers, there were backing musicians, people in the band. And sometimes all those roles have really come down to one person. So, where it used to be maybe 20 people could be involved in a recording session to get a song done, it could be all up to you. So it takes, takes more knowledge to do that. You could still work the old way. It's not very practical for a lot of people. But, you could still do everything, but you could do so much more, All right, we see Roland Stuff joining from Sussex in England. Yeah, and Jazz Dudes bringing up a great point. 30 years ago, one day in studios, at least $1,000. So, yeah. Okay, so Strict 9 just asks, when I mix and master a song, how high should I have my physical mix board master volume and output for speakers? So ideally, it depends if you're, if it's a hardware mixer, you probably want it set at unity, as close to unity as possible. When you're utilizing like the mix console here in Cubase, I think that people have better results if, when you're touching this, like during the mix down process. I know a lot of mastering engineers, and I remember working with Phil Ramone on his session for an artist, and it was interesting because he just sat down with all the engineers, and he set the control room volume, and he put a little piece of sticky tape on his control room volume, and he said, okay, we're never going above, we all agree that this is a great level. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. Because at the end, as time goes on, people tend to move, increase the volume. So Phil Ramone would just put a little piece of tape here by the master monitoring volume, and said, okay, and they made the decision at the beginning of the session that it would never go above that volume because they felt that it would be lying to you to do that. So some people will, set that particular level. So if you're kind of doing in software, where people run into gain structure issues is when they're trying to overcompensate for gain structure issues that happened previously in the session. So sometimes people maybe have the fader cranked all the way up and they put a compressor and they add 6 dB of gain on a compressor, but their master fader here is clipping unless it's way down volume wise. So it's probably better to have the master fader near unity and adjust the gain structure here. So if you're taking your mix from your computer, like a multi-track, and going through an analog chain, that could change things as well. But, most people would want to kind of be near unity and make sure that, you're not overcompensating for gain deficiencies by cranking up your speakers where it's so painfully loud that your control room has to be down here. And, so those are some of the things to kind of watch out for. All right, wonderful to see Lawrence Koch checking in from Rhode Island. All right, we have James Daly checking in from Vancouver. Thanks for joining us again. Great to see you on. All right, Greg, if I'm after a particular instrument sound, where can I start to find which Steinberg VST package it's on? I'm actually writing different ukuleles for one number I'm working on. Thanks. All right, so let's say if I was just kind of looking for instruments, so let's say if we go to VST instruments and I just want to, I think if you had to, like Hallian Sonic is good because it's going to have a broad variety. So if I was to come over here, I would, let's say if we just go to, let's open up an instance of Hallian Sonic, like from within the instrument. So let's say I'm going to open up Hallian or Hallian Sonic. And when we see all listed here, what I would do is just say ukulele. And then, so you could just, see, I probably spelled it wrong. So let's say, okay, when I'm here, I can see, here's some of my, and you could just kind of type in, let me just see if I'm spelling it, ukulele, okay. And just kind of type in. Hang on, I may have to let my son in real quick. I'm going to let my son in the house real quick, but hang on, I'll be right back in a minute. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, so try just looking for all and then just kind of typing in, like let's say you're looking for nylon guitar. And then you could see, let's see if I can spell ukulele right. Or there may not be ukulele sounds, but so that's how I would kind of search for particular sounds. Sorry about that. Michael Team says Dad's work is never done. Yeah. It's a good thing I have the Ring doorbell so I could see who's at the door. All right, and we see some jazz dude sharing some ukulele sounds. It could be like ample sounds, pretty good at having different instruments like that. All right, let's get to some of the questions that were mailed in. Open up a project here. All right, so I got this question. It's actually from Fred Corey that I wanted to share with people. Fred was on the live stream a little earlier, so and his question that he had for me in a session I wanted to share with other people is he had how to convert like track versions to different audio tracks to share with someone from a different DAW. So when we come over here, we have track versions. So say, we did take 1. I could see take 2. I select all these channels. We could go to take 3. So we can have kind of alternate takes. Other programs may call this a playlist. In Cubase terminology and nomenclature, we'll call it a track version. So, in essence, what we have is 3 different audio recordings, and we want to pass this on to someone using a different program who's not smart enough to be running Cubase or Nuendo, so that they could have all the different files and maybe do their own comping and have access to all the files. So when we want to do this, first thing we're going to do is, so each of these 3 tracks has 3 track versions. So we have version 1, and these are all, let's say, different audio files. Version 2, version 3. So I'm going to go to my project menu, and we say, let's go to track versions, and we're going to convert and say create lanes from versions. So now each of these, we could come over and we will see their lanes. So we have one active lane. So the conversions, we could take lanes, convert them to track versions, and convert them to lanes. I'm going to select these particular lanes. So I can hold down my Control Command key, select the lanes. And now what we want to do is take these lanes and convert them to audio tracks so that I can pass it on to someone else. I'm going to right click. Let's come here and we're going to say create tracks from lanes. And now we have all of our audio tracks have been created from the particular lanes for us. So that way we could take our lanes, convert them to different audio tracks, and pass it on to someone else that's running a different DAW. So. All right, let me just hide all my tracks here. All right, our next question was how to deselect the last note in a MIDI region or phrase. Do you have any ideas? Okay, so let's say we have a MIDI phrase here. And if we do like a Command or Control A, we can see that all of the notes are selected. So in this example, we want to select, we basically want to not select everything except the last note in an automated way. So I think if we come over, and this is kind of a combination of a logical editor. So it's a preset I made. I think we could choose deselect MIDI notes beyond cursor. So, and this is, I have multiple events selected here on this particular track. So, or I have one event selected, and we have kind of a similar event there. So so the first thing is we're going to utilize this. I'll make this just a little larger so we can see it. We're going to choose to deselect notes that the position is beyond the cursor. And what we're going to do is a macro to kind of set the cursor how we want it to be. So I'm going to go to my key commands, and we'll say deselect last note. So I'm going to set the transport locators to selection. We're going to locate the previous event, and then we're going to process this project logical editor preset. So basically we're going to set our locators around an event, move the cursor to the beginning of this note, and then move the cursor to the beginning, and then we're going to deselect all the notes that are actually beyond the cursor. So we're going to select all the events, locators to the selection end, locate the previous event, and so when we do this, we'll see that these events will become selected, but the last note, if I did everything right, should not be selected. So we'll run the macro. So this macro is these 3 steps plus at the end this project logical editor. So I'll just choose to create the MIDI note or run the macro, and we can see that these notes are selected and the last note is not selected. So once again, we want to deselect notes that are beyond the cursor. We're going to select all the notes. We're going to locate to the selection end. We're then going to move the cursor to the previous event and then run the deselect notes beyond cursor logical editor preset. All right, so we had a question. Can the pro version be started as artist or as AILE if we want to exchange files with people who have AI? So yeah, I'll show you this. I'll exit out of Cubase here quickly. So we'll show it to you. So when you start up, if you hold down the Alt Control Shift on Windows or Command Option Shift on Mac OS, you'll get kind of a safe start mode. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hold those keys down. So I'm on Mac OS, so I'm going to hold down Command Option Shift or Alt Control Shift on Windows. So I start, I'm just going to hold those keys down. Maybe I didn't exit out of Cubase. Let me close the projects. So let me just quit. All right, so I'm going to start it. So I'm going to click on the icon and hold those 3 keys down. So Control, Alt, and Shift. Let me see. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I think it's just the Option key. I'm sorry. I put it in safe mode. So I think it's just the Alt or Option key. So let me do that one more time. I did the wrong key. All right, so I'm just going to hold down the Alt or Option key. And now we could choose to start it in Cubase Pro 14, Cubase Artist 14, Elements 14, AI 14, or LE 14. So hold down the Alt or Option key. All right, so we have another question. Where can I download the Cubase 11 Pro without the download assistant? I'm getting a Java error message with the assistant can't download anything anymore. Okay, so let's take a look. So I think, most of the Cubase, I think all the Cubase versions are still available online. So when we look at this, we could say, let's go to our web browser. We will say Cubase 11 Pro download. And this would still require the USB E licenser. So say from the Steinberg site to Cubase 11 updates and downloads. And we'll go to the Cubase Pro 11. We'll scroll down so you can see the application plus all the content that you can install directly from the website. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Can you give recommendations for keeping instrument takes? For example, if I record a take and then I turn on lanes to try again, I can't figure out how to record over it. I've looked through the merge, the takes on me with audio, it works fine. I can keep adding takes. It just keeps adding new lanes with the instruments or MIDI. It only works if I loop record. For some reason, most of the time I don't loop the record. I might even start recording from different places. With audio, it seems to handle great. If there isn't possible with MIDI, can you recommend how to store takes in an organized manner for easy recall? So I think it's slightly different than audio because you could actually merge events in MIDI versus, so let's say we want to come over here. I'll just do a quick record on lanes. So I will... Let's say I'll just come over here. I'll just set a quick punch out. So let's say I want to come over and... All right, so we have that note here. So I'm just going to set my MIDI record mode here to new parts. So let's say when we do for cycled recording, here I'll do stacked. So I'll do stacked. But if you're not doing cycled recording, so I can come over here. Let's record a different note. All right. So now kind of sorry, I was on the wrong track. All right. All right, so now when I come over here, I will put it in record again. All right, so these are still kind of, so you go to look at it in lanes. We can see that we have both of these in lanes. So let's go ahead and record again. And we'll come over. So while they're in lanes, we could just see that they're just kind of each showing up, and we'll play. If we have the lanes closed, we can now just come over here and, because we have these set, I have these set to create new parts, we could merge or choose to replace. So if I have it on replace and I jump here, now that will replace the underlying information. So if we have this set to new parts, the new parts will kind of be stacked on top of each other. We can see those in lanes. We could merge, so it's one single part, and the notes will just kind of keep getting added into the same event, and replace will get rid of the underlying events. Okay. All right, so we have a question. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your hot mess workflow. For example, are you using Cubase projects? Do you zip files before sending? What service are you using to share files back and forth? Do you have to deal with larger Cubase projects? How do you make sure your projects are compatible with your other creators? Things along those lines. So generally, like when I get a hot mess project to play bass on, I get just a kind of basically like often just an MP3. So mine will kind of look very similar to this. And what I will do often is, and often I get like a tempo indication in the name of the file. So you say, okay, this is 105 BPM. Okay, so I could set my project to 105 BPM. So what I get is basically the file without the bass part. I often will take these and drag it and make a chord track from it. So I have like a lead sheet. So you can see that like some of the parts here, I'll just kind of, do the chords if I just want to have that as a reference. And then what I do is I just will do my bass recording here. So this is what I have, and I will record just a single track. And then I will, in the service that I often get the files, I get them from Gareth, will be just using WeTransfer. So occasionally I may ask for like a multi-track, but for maybe that's happened 2 or 3 times, but generally I'll just get one, like a stereo mix file as an MP3 or a WAV file with tempo as an indication, and I'll just record the bass along that, and I will upload my bass part via WeTransfer to Gareth, and then he do all the magic of making everything happen and sound cohesive and mix. All right, question. Is there an easy and effective way to convert a Nuendo or Cubase project to a Pro Tools project other than just exporting stems? So most people with Pro Tools, what they will utilize is for the MIDI information, a standard MIDI file. And for audio, they'll export an AAF or OMF. So I think Avid can be really, strangely very inclusive with their file format. Maybe they're afraid if people could get files in and out easily that they might not have a reason to stay in a particular platform, perhaps. And that's a limitation. I remember, I'm not sure if this is still the case, but for years and years, even the video software side couldn't open up a Pro Tools project directly. That may have changed. I haven't kept up. Sometimes it's, it could be very inclusive. There is a new standard that Steinberg is embracing called DAW project. So I think Bitwig, Nuendo, Cubase, and VST Live are all utilizing DAW project, and this will kind of do what a lot of people have wanted to do for a long time. So we've had a lot of people that have been able to migrate their Studio One projects directly into Cubase. And that will carry over a lot of the plugins, accents, kind of what you would expect. So that's kind of a new industry standard. I don't think Avid has incorporated that. So, but you could always check with them. But, for the time being, just because, lack of functionality in other programs, you may have to work with stems. All right. Next question we had says, when opening the very audio window, can you save the layout options, i.e. the zoom amounts, vertical and horizontal? Every time I open a new very audio event, I have to zoom in. It'd be nice to have that as a default. So let's say if we're here and I want to double click, and we'll do our very audio analysis on this. So I think it tries to, depending on this, where the events occur. So I didn't do anything there, and we can see like a good amount of the very audio segments are visible. So you may be able to come over if we click here, just see if it's like, if it's a little, like I know we could have kind of like our zoom commands. Now, one of the things that you could be able to do, let's say if you don't like the zoom factor, you think it's off, is maybe, let's see if this works in the very audio, but if you go to edit, there's a zoom full command. Yeah, it's probably doesn't work so as well in the very, I don't think it's designed for the very audio editor. but I don't think that there's a, I think it tries to optimize it for, if you're in the lower zone versus the upper zone, but you may have to make adjustments depending on the range of the particular instrument. All right, so we have a MIDI transpose question. Next question is, when I have a MIDI monitor transpose on, I'm in a key editor window. When you play the notes, it plays the original notes, not the transposed ones. Is there a way around this without having to transpose all the MIDI notes individually inside the editor window? So let's take a look. Let's say we have our MIDI transpose on this event, so we'll just take a listen to it and say, okay, we have, I'll activate this project. Okay, so we'll play just a very simple phrase here musically, just one single pitch. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways of doing it. So if we take our MIDI inserts, so let's say if you're using the MIDI modifiers and we set this to transpose from, let's say, the pitch of C to the pitch of D, so we could transpose. So this is keeping the same pitch, and as this pitch is coming in or playing back, it's transposing. So now we'll hear that the pitch will change up a whole step. So we could just simply have that automatically. Now, if I wanted this event to reflect the transpositions, we could go to your MIDI menu and we could choose to freeze MIDI modifiers. So we'll see that when I freeze the MIDI modifiers, the transposition that's been applied here in the MIDI modifiers is now going to be frozen, and we'll see the pitch in the key editor here switch from C0 or C3 to D3. So as we do that, we see that now the pitch has transposed. So we could do it like that. Now, if you want to record with the transposition, what you could do is we'll say, okay, we're not going to do transposition here. If we go to a MIDI insert, we could use a MIDI modifiers as an insert key. We could transpose now. And when we go to record, what we could do is we go to your MIDI inserts, you'll see this little line. So if I record on the pitch of C, and we have our, let's say, our transposition here set to a whole tone up. So I'm playing a C on a computer keyboard, but it's playing a D. And because I have moved this line in the MIDI inserts down, so we go to our MIDI inserts, this line. So if I record and play a pitch of C, this is being applied during the transposition. So now when we go to look at these notes, I play to C, it's recorded as a D3. Now if we use a transpose track, which is another option, so let's say I want to take these notes and we're going to transpose them up in my transposition track. Let's say we're in the key of, we're seeing a C3 here, and I want my transpose track, and we could do this for our events. I'm going to transpose it up a major second. So that's going to transpose, but there is a function in the key editor if you use a transpose track called indicate transposition. So it's right here, which looks like this little icon. So if I turn this on, I could actually see what the result is of the transpose track in the key editor without having to move the notes. So give those options a try. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. You could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. If you've learned a new trick, make sure you actually hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. So the artist known as Love just saying Nuendo 14 is out and working great. Okay. Michael Teams wants to make sure that everyone has whacked the like button. All right, great to see Michael Pierce on. Just popped in to say hi. And just hit the like button. All right. Chaz Dude just made a great comment. The MIDI inserts are the best helpers in Cubase. All right, Michael Pierce had a question, but he'll save it for Friday. Hope to see you on the live stream. All right, so Val's just saying you learned a lot today. Know how to make tracks out of layers, versions, takes. That's great. All right, so we see Tim Cage says Buddy's been in his lap the whole time, preventing his ability to access the keyboard. But great session, everybody. All right, see great comment from Gerald Ely. So JVI says, I did not know about the line on the MIDI inserts. You could record MIDI in another key. Wow. So yeah, it's great. All right, so I think we're just out of question. We're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. And if you've learned a new tip, new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. We'll be back Friday, and Friday will be the last Club Cubase of the month. So we'll be doing our Zoom social meetup. So look forward to seeing some new faces and meeting new people and seeing old friends from the Club Cubase live streams here. And I hope that everyone is safe and well, and we'll see everyone back on Friday. Thank you very much. Bye.